Hello, I'm Jason, and today in this video I'll be talking about some Python tips and tricks that I think you'll find useful as kind of a beginner or intermediate developer, or especially and more specifically if you're a future student of Mr. Eccles' AI class. These are just a quick list of compiled things that I found really useful that I kind of wish I'd known as I was starting out. And these are, of course, completely unnecessary to to just pass the course, but I thought that these really helped me a lot while I was going along and learning new things while I was in this class. And so let's just get started. Right now I'm here in Pycharm, and I have this file open, and the first thing I actually wanted to go over is this thing on the right you see here. It's it's kind of like a mini map for your code, and of course it's completely unnecessary, but at least for me, I know that if you have a massive file with what, like 100 and 431 lines, you can get just completely stuck when you're just grinding out some bug, and after you finally fix it, you're like all disoriented and confused about where you are. I think this little mini map here on the right has a great sense of utility where I can kind of see where I am. And the way you actually download this is it's a extension in Pycharm, and the way that you download all extensions is you go up here to the top left with File, go to Settings, and then you go to Plugins. It's this little tab here on the left. Go to Marketplace, and of course you type in the name of whatever you're looking for. In this case, it's called CodeGlance, and right here you'll be able to install it, but of course I've already installed this. So that's a neat little thing I wanted to show you. But for something that's a bit, I think that will be really common when you're developing Python in the future, is actually type checking. So this is kind of the second thing, and it's that especially for those that are coming from APCS or from a Java background, you're probably really used to specifying a variable as an integer or a double or a just any sort of type before you instantiate it, or whenever you're trying to use it. And the one of the great selling points of Python is that it's really flexible, and you don't need to specify all of these little nitty-gritty details that you don't really need to know. But what I found is that while that flexibility is nice, sometimes it's still really good to have that type checking, whether that be in your functions or your classes, because you can get confused if you have hundreds of variables. You want to know, like, okay, so I named this variable array. I'm pretty sure it's an array, but what about PFA or AUC? Like, is that supposed to be a integer? Is that supposed to be a float? I don't know. And so the way that you can actually do that is, let me just show you an example with a function. So say I'm at this function just arbitrarily. This is just kind of a random file that I made in the past, but it's just called a KPCA projection, and you have all these variables that you would normally you have these variables as you would normally define a function. The way that you can actually type check these variables is by putting a colon after them and then specifying what type it is. So for example, let's say scale is a let's say it's just a list, right? So then you would literally type out list, and there you go. You can see that Pycharm kind of recognizes it. Points is also list, for example. You can also do any sort of type. It can be like a float here. This vector is probably also another list. If you're importing a package like NumPy, which you will use later in the year, if you import any sort of package, it supports those kind of classes as well. So in NumPy, there's like n-dimensional arrays, so you can specify that's of that type. You can do integers, you can do anything. And so that's just really nice, in my opinion, to have. And especially, it actually tells you if your type checking is wrong. So say, for example, I'm trying to take the size of, I don't know what exactly is a great example, but essentially Pycharm will mark it as like, okay, bro, you marked this as a list, but you're obviously not using it as a list, so it'll tell you that. Just kind of a final thing about type checking is you can also specify what the return type of a function is. And the way you do that is right before the colon in the function definition, but after the last parentheses, you make an arrow, which is just a dash, and then a greater than sign, and then whatever type you want. So let's just say it's a tuple, for example, and that's how you specify the outputs. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo that because I'm pretty sure all those types are wrong, but that's type checking. And the third thing I wanted to go over is something I feel like people don't really realize that they have the functionality for in while they're debugging. And you know, debugging is something I'm sure that you know about and everybody knows about how to do. It's pretty simple. After you run your file once and you've made a configuration up here, you click this little bug button next to it, and if you've made a breakpoint in your code, so I believe, did I make a breakpoint? I made a breakpoint. Well, let's go ahead and just make a breakpoint randomly. I don't know, let's just put it there, for example. And actually, let's not put it there just because I know that I want to land in a place where I have a lot of variables. And so let's just, oh, there's already a breakpoint there. So I'll just leave it be. I'll hit debug. And as that's loading up, as it finally reaches it, yeah, there, now we're in the debug console. You can see down here where you have all of your variables, which is really nice. You know, Pycharm has really nice debugger. You can see that, oh, anomalies is a n-dimensional array of shape 100 by 2, and you can drop down to get more information about it. Something that's also pretty nice is that on the right here for most arrays, you can click view as array. It actually gives you a nice visualization for what your array actually looks like. So that's pretty cool. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is, while this is really cool, sometimes, you know, you want to be a bit more hands-on. You say you're breaking you're debugging your code here because you realize that skeleton, there's something wrong with that array, right? And you want to play around with it and see what exactly is wrong with it. Well, you know, you could of course click the plus sign here and say, okay, I want to do skeleton, like, I don't know, index of 0. Let's see what that is. Okay, that's pretty cool, but it gets kind of burdensome. And so if you actually want to edit the code that the way it is, which is kind of like, you know, you're running up your code up to the breakpoint and you want to just play with your code at that point, on the left here you can hit, you see how it's highlighted on debugger right now, you can hit console, and what that does is it connects the debugger to a Python console, so all of your variables that you're looking for, they're right there. So earlier we wanted to look at skeleton, you see that skeleton is actually there. You know, skeleton 0 is going to tell you everything you need there. And, you know, maybe I want to concatenate something onto skeleton. You know, you can do that. And so that's kind of the nice thing about the console here, and that I find really useful. And let's stop the debugger here. And the fourth little quick tip that is also really nice when you have a really big file is that, say for example, you see this massive, you know, function, and it's being called, and you have a really big file, you have to scroll up and you're like, okay, where's the definition for that? Oh, it's, you know, we happen to find it here, but you can imagine that can be pretty hard if you have a really big file. There's actually a way you can jump to the function definition, and the way you can do that is you hold left control and you click the function name, and when you click that, it takes you straight to where the function definition is, which is really nice because you can basically, you know, just hop around your code and see where, you know, everything is. You saw there that if you control click the function definition, it actually shows you where it's being implemented, so that's nice as well. So I think that's all I have right now for what you can do in Pycharm. This quick little thing is that you might be wondering, okay, what is this if name is equal to main? What is that stuff? You can think of that as kind of the driver method in Java. it's just a nice way of organization to say that, okay, my code actually starts running down here. um, and because you have all those function definitions, you can have a, if name equals to main, this shows you exactly where the code starts to run. You can see that Pycharm recognizes that because it has the little play button next